Hello, today we're talking about an executable version of Pavlov 3D. Pavlov 3D is written in Python, and we used PyInstaller to create these two executable files. Now the run will do the same thing as the CLI. The run will just skip the CLI and will run with the current configuration. All right, so there's some other folders here that we should talk about. Let's look at config entry. All config entry is it says which configuration will we use. So if we go to that file, these are the program parameters laid out in a JSON file. I'll get back to this in a second. It'll make more sense. So we have our imports and our exports. Imports, these are our raw data files. So here's a CSV file. We have a column of time, a column of force. We get a curve over time. We have a few other files, and we want to visualize all those at once in 3D. That's what Pavlov 3D does. It converts those three files into an export file. Look at our most recent one that we made. This is a Unix timestamp down to the second. Great. Okay, so these are our three curves. They've got a certain color style, they have a certain geometry, and they have their titles. The same text from the column headers is copied, and we also get to see our maximum values for each dimension, which there is a problem here. This is not, that's just double this number. It doesn't mean anything right now. There's a reason for that. I won't go into it at this moment. That's the only super erroneous thing here. So all of these file names have the letter CSV in them, and they all have a dot. And so we have text filtering for grouping. So these are all in the group dot, and these are all in the subgroup CSV. Because they all share that name, they're all together. Now, if you had other ones that shared other names, they would be organized in other subgroups and groups. So that's why if we go to these first two lines, that is defining what are our names we're going to use for our first group and for our second tier group. So if there was an SLXX file or a JSON file, those would be organized differently. This controls the stacking of the model. So this is all of the model export control. After that, we have import control. So this says which columns are we using and where do we cut off. So this is 0 because, hey, in the 0 line, that first row, that is where our columns are. So we're not going to skip anything. That's our start index of 0. And then we're going to use these plugins to control how we import from a raw data file, how we manifest color and other attributes and geometry in an export. And there's a bit more color control here, and then what type of file are we outputting with what encoding. So that's all of our control. And you can create other user input configs, and you can save those and reuse them later easily. So our plugins, this controls how the user can control geometry and import and things of that nature without having to get into the full meat and potatoes of the program. So they can have a bit more control. So like one example is, these are all the names of each mesh, right? So one mesh by itself, that's one mesh, and it has a geometry that is some 0 height at 0 width, and then it goes up to its height, and then it goes across to its width and its height, down to its width and 0, and then back to 0, 0. So that is controlled boop, 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 here in our export geometry. So this is how our geometry is defined. And there's some data point object that has a time value, a half-width time value, which is just like a shared point width. So that's this point size right here. It's all the same thing. So there's a few security issues. We really don't need the style object being passed around for the user to see. We can get this point size in another way. Color determination, this is kind of just saying, hey, whatever color you are, that's the color you are. This probably doesn't have to happen here because it's in separate color module. This is how node naming happens. So hypothetically, if you wanted the node name to manifest differently, you could. So like this name right here, time, value, force, value, index. That comes from that line right there. So if you wanted to change how that manifests, you could do that. And if you wanted a more complex geometry or a different geometry, you could do that as well. So that gives the user that control. And here's the import plugin we're using for 2D CSVs. So this is where the data point object is assigned with what does time mean, what does height mean, what does depth mean, and where do these vectors come from. And this gets into some things that are not here. We don't have import lib object in with us, so you can't really know as a user, like I don't have access to the meat and potatoes. So really there's a lot of cleanup I need to do under the hood to make it easy for the user to be able to control some degree of input, control some degree of export without A, having security issues, and B, making it too complicated. But this is what Pavlov was originally designed to do. In our most recent iteration, we were in a web app where you really didn't have access to your user input config or to any of these plugins, which it's designed for the user to have access to the plugins, to be able to use different plugins. And that design can continue to improve. But yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, you can run all of that with a graphical user interface. You could say, hey, do you want to change based on, what's standard? But here, you can just run, using the run executable. So it'll go through, it'll use your user input configs, and it'll run and it'll export a file. So that's just run, and that's 20 extra megabytes that you really don't need because the CLI does the same thing. The CLI will launch the command line interface, and at this point, you actually don't really have much control in the CLI. You kind of just get to see things step by step. But in terms of like, I want to make a change to one of my configurations. Like, well, then go copy a configuration file and make a new one, and then change the one that's pointed at by the config entry point. That's how you're going to control it at this point. We want to make it a bit more user-friendly. So here's another security issue. At this point, really, it's just like troubleshooting and seeing what the program does. So you can run just main, or you can go step by step. And hey, look, there's our file. Skip interface, no. Okay, so usually an interface will have a filter of some sort. So this is just saying like use all of the files at their full length without filtering in that are in the imports folder. Great, that's been allowed. Import data. It pulls it in. One thing we're not doing is using pandas. It was actually, I used to be deploying in Vercel, and then I realized that packaging it in Vercel and including pandas was too heavy, and so we've worked around that. So that's why you have this GDF situation. It's not pretty, but it works, and it's a lot lighter, so it doesn't bother me any. Build point cloud. What else? Export model. And it's thinking. So we'd like to be able to make things that are not FBX files. So PLY files are excellent. Making a Blender file would be excellent. Those are like two really obvious choices. Or making even like a Unity environment, but that's a whole other program that's not this lightweight thing. So hopefully we'll be able to ship this at like 35 megabytes or something. But yeah, you can do everything you just did just by saying main, and it'll run. So is there much purpose to a CLI? Yeah, it's cool. I'd like to add more fidelity so a person can tweak some stuff if they want. But really the fastest way, if you're a super user and you understand how to use the program and you want to change some configuration stuff, you get in here and you say, so like let's do one actually. This will make more sense. So let's say copy, paste. What's today? Today is the 10th of October. Just gonna copy that. I'm gonna change where this is pointed to. Great. Okay, so one thing I'll do is I'll change, I'll say we have these same files. So we have files that are alum, Seahawk. Yeah, cool. Side 1, side 2. So let's do that. Side 1, side 2, alum, Seahawk. So those are our groups tier 1 and our groups tier 2. And let's change, diagonal stack for the big one. We're not going to get, this isn't going to be, we would need a lot more data to really understand what's happening there. So I'm not going to mess with it at this juncture. But I could change my plugins if I wanted to change my geometry. I haven't messed with the geometries in a while, so I think something might break. Actually, let's call this a true gradient just for fun. Bin gradient versus true. Actually, let's look. Boop, 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 boop. Plugins, and I think we can do a per curve. Yeah, let's use that. Copy per curve. Great. Okay, cool. All right, so we're pointing to it. It's in there. And we can just hit run. Error. Not sure where we aired out, so let's run the CLI. Will this stay open? That's a good question. It did not stay open, so let's do something else. Let's just say this will stay open now. Unhandled exception. No such user input config input 10 October JSON. Oh, it's JSON. That's why. Excuse me. Oh, Lordy. Yeah, there's our problem. Save. Great. All right, let's try that again. Boop, 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 boop. Handled exception. No attribute hierarchy object. Oh, see, now we're getting into some interesting weeds that like I haven't touched in a good long while, but that's okay. And this is another reason why things need to be improved for the user, because you don't want to have to dig around every time you make a change. The tiniest moves you make. All right, that should do it. Boop, boop, boop. Darn. Let's see. For curve object. Plugin object has no attribute hierarchy object. Hierarchy object. Did I spell it wrong? Check, check, check. Assign scene object. It should have already been assigned. CLS. Huh. Let's look at the other color option. And the tiniest moves you make, the whole damn world shakes. Whoa. Yep, that's exactly what that says. Oh. This is enumerating. Why are you enumerating? What are you doing with that eye? It's doing nothing with that eye. It used to do something with that eye. That looks like it still is. Either way, that one doesn't use it. Self.hierarchy object. Huh. Well, it looks like it should work, eh? I mean, there's really no way to know without digging in. on the other side of things, but I don't want to dig in on the other side of things. That would defeat the purpose of this exercise. Oh, it's because, no, not either. I might have to repackage it because it's included. These plugins are included. Oh, then what's the point of being able to edit them? That's a good question. Where does it get to? Let's see. Will it? I don't think it will. It believes it is in line 24. Line 24. Yeah, so that's the problem. So we'll have to repackage. Let's do it. CD. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, great. PyInstaller, core CLI. So here I include in a hidden import plugins, but actually it's not doing us any good right now. So let's chuck that. And we're actually not, yeah, including all this data like config entry. That's not helping anybody. User input configs, that's actually not helping me. Include plugins, kill all that. Okay, now it won't get confused. Great. I think we're good. And it should override the last one. So this is running PyInstaller to create a one-file version of the CLI. So all of Pavlov is it's in core, and there's a lot going on in here with the Python. But you don't need that, just the distribution file. We still have imports, exports, plugins, user input config. Alphanumeric character library probably doesn't need to be here. I just haven't figured out how to package it inside of the executable yet, but we will get rid of that later. Okay, this is almost done. Still hasn't updated. Because, oh damn. Oh, it's because it's open right now. Let's kill it. Delete. It's open. Where is it open? It's open over here. Kill that, kill that. Delete. Great. Try again. Close. The tiniest moves you make. Great. And then we'll also, just for fun, create another main. We'll include the splash fly in this one. Let's just grab this. Copy. Paste. I'll change the name of it later. Let's get rid of this. And there is a way in the command line to change the name of it. You know, if it imports as run, or if it imports as main and you want to call it run, like that's all fine. This is kind of taking a long time, isn't it? Boop, 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 boop. Thank you. Okay, great. Now it's there. So I can do that programmatically. Okay, great. So now I've got my configuration set up. I should be able to access these. Let's run it and see what happens. It failed. Why did it fail? No module named import plugin. Huh. It's right there. It just doesn't know how to find it because of the dynamic import. So I want to allow the dynamic import. And I want to allow people to edit. I'm not sure if both will be possible. That's the whole point, though. I'll just have to change the way. I won't be able to use import lib. There'll have to be another way. But okay, so I'm learning something here. I think. I actually don't know if I'm learning something. If I'll be able to edit those things after the fact. So what should work is if we run this now. What? Oh. We just don't want to have to repack the executable every time we make a change to those files. We want those files to be accessible to the user. And so, of course, the other way is then to have a graphical user interface or an object that's accessible in the command line interface, and then you can update the values there without having to do it from the JSON file. And so all that can work. I would just like people to be able to run it without an interface and just edit the files. But apparently that might not work. And there might be a hidden import. It's one of two. I've done it redundantly, right? Where there's a hidden import plugins and then there's an add data plugins. Now this is the core values. So I'm not sure which it will be. I don't know the difference. I was just trying to make things work. And honestly, I was just trying to I was just trying to get out one executable. But now this is honestly good functionality, what we've been talking about here. That's one of my glorious. Come on, finish. Okay, great. Damn. No attribute hierarchy object. What the hell? Hierarchy. It says it right there. For curve object in self.hierarchy object. Self.hierarchy object. Self. Assign scene object. CLS. This is erring in line 24 per curve. line 24. Prepare color style. Huh, well, something's going on. Obviously, I have some work to do. I don't fully understand what the issue is here, obviously. For curve object, doing self.hierarchy object. Self.hierarchy object. CLS.hierarchy object. Yeah? Yeah, I really don't know. Maybe I was wrong about this whole thing about needing to repack, because they gave me the line number of just prepare color style. Maybe this was all a ruse. Let's just be silly. Great. Let's do that. Ooh. Yeah, so it's reading it wrong now. Interesting. Huh. Well, I guess we can't use that. Fuck you. Well, now all kinds of things are broken. Group object has no attribute. All right. Well, now my pride is damaged, so. Great, that worked. Fix this. Deal with that later. Great, okay. So nothing changed, it's all the same. Our export file that we just made is not new or novel, it's the same as the ones we've been making. I was not able to change things, which is sad. And I was really excited to be able to change things on the fly. But, you know, that could very well be a security issue, and you might just need a graphical user interface for that. Some heavier stuff. But anyway, Pavlov, yay.